Good morning, everybody. September 1st, 2024. It was 78 degrees in the car when I got out. I actually kind of track this kind of thing, and my memory is we wouldn't arrive at this kind of temperature in Houston until about mid-September. So it was not last summer, gosh. So we've caught a break. Appreciate the blessings. I am Harvey Aronson. I'm one of the founding resident teachers, also known as Lama Namgyal Dorje. And this is Sunday morning when we have a half-hour teaching before our meditation practice. So why do we meditate? Many of us start in order to calm down. It's understandable and it's worthwhile. Calmness and self-regulation are extraordinarily significant qualities to have in our lives. And I've been involved with meditation for over 50 years. And some of the features of meditation have moved from background to foreground. They may not seem significant initially, but over time and on reflection, some things begin to appear significant, and hopefully on the basis of talking together, you may see some interest or value in what I'm talking about today. There is a simple word in Tibetan, soma, a very simple soma, we all can say it. Not all Tibetan words are simple to pronounce. It means freshness. And freshness is associated with the nature of the mind, with our deepest nature. Our deepest nature is fresh. Freshness. Alive, natural, effortless. What wonderful words. Fresh, alive, natural, effortless. Someone has said in response to my talking about freshness, it turns out to be one of my favorite issues and topics, that it's a bit of a tough concept to fully understand or appreciate. And they are right. If you look back on your own experience and just even take a moment and contemplate when you've had an experience of something that you feel is fresh, just do a kind of thought experiment. What makes you consider something fresh? It's actually very interesting to contemplate. How do we know something is fresh? I'm reading at some works by a psychologist, philosopher named Eugene Gendlin. Very heavy sledding. It's kind of interesting reading a book where, you might understand every word, but when they're put together in a sentence, it's like, what? But a little bit that I can understand is that Gendlin sees everything emerging from the body. Our information comes from the body, and it starts in a kind of inchoate, incomprehensible, not able to pin it down kind of feelings. And I think if we think about it, freshness might be one of those interesting, easily, almost incomprehensible. How do I pin that down? And it turns out it's very useful to, when we have that kind of vague, what am I feeling? And if we can actually find a word that seems to match, it can be really helpful in moving us forward in our experience. There's almost a felt click of recognition. So freshness. There are a lot of venue within which we experience freshness. What's it about a salad that makes it seem fresh? Is it the looks? Is it the taste? You all probably have our own votes. What is it about a talk that makes it seem fresh? You know, if we engage with any of the classical arts, like a symphony or a ballet, the core of the classical arts is that they're repetitive. You know, there's the program. There's Beethoven's Ninth. It's all written out. It's a template. So really, especially in the classical arts, what is it that we can say, oh, that rendition of Beethoven's Ninth or Vivaldi's Four Seasons? I mean, these are just very, very popular works. For a while, I was kind of collecting Four Seasons renditions, Vivaldi's Four Seasons. What makes it fresh? Well, sometimes people explicitly change the order of things. Well, that makes something fresh. But sometimes they play the exact same thing, but it's like, ooh, there's some kind of aliveness, some kind of energy here that, and it's not just because they're necessarily speeding something up, something fresh. You know, one way to contemplate what freshness is to consider what makes things dull, boring, dead, stale. What does it feel like in our body when we're confronted with something that is dead and stale versus fresh and alive? For us as meditators, these are not insignificant questions. If the nature of reality is fresh, then the more that freshness is showing up in the quality of our experience, the closer we are to the nature of reality. Yay. It's a lovely way to know that we're kind of closer to the way things really are. You know, the obstruction is, in a way, our ordinary mind. Our ordinary mind, as brain doctors, neuroscientists will equate with our cortical operations. They're very, very useful and necessary. I mean, it's important if we were in the jungle and we heard a sound for us to be able to, in, like 250 nanoseconds, milliseconds, to say tiger and start running. That kind of recognition capacity, the ability to identify as similar, has a lot of usefulness. It may be very important to very quickly discern enemy, friend. Okay. In psychotherapy and psychology, we talk about the amygdala. It's a little small organ in the brain. And again, I think in about 250 milliseconds, it will register danger or safety. Problem with that is, when your father hit you, he used to raise his right eyebrow. So now if you see anybody with a raised eyebrow, right eyebrow, the amygdala is very, very quick and very, very bright, like danger. But guess what? It may not be the case. So something that can be useful can also be deceiving. A lot of what people do is not necessarily percentage-wise, but we do see people really seeking some kind of freshness, and sometimes in ways that might be strange to us. Certainly, people use mind-altering substances from alcohol on up to achieve a kind of different experience. When I was a kid, for some reason we learned there was a certain way of breathing and holding one another that we could pass out. And it was very, very exciting for us to pass out for some reason at the age of 12. It's really terrible. It's very, very brain dangerous to do that kind of thing. But it was something fresh and new and exciting. Some people go to horror movies to experience freshness. It really jacks you up. You can feel really, really alive at horror movies. The line between anxiety and freshness, in a way, I think physiologically, it's non-existent actually. It's just, in a way, the way we interpret our experience is one thing might feel like fresh and alive, and for others it might be agitating and anxiety-provoking. The roller coaster is kind of the poster child for this kind of discernment. For some people it's just so exciting and so fresh and alive. And for some people it's terrifying. I think one of the reasons we meditate over time is that it can get us in touch with freshness and aliveness. Let's face it, watching the breath, whether you're watching it at your nostrils, or you're watching it at your throat or your lungs, if you're watching the breath in your belly, on paper, this is a boring activity. What could be more unstimulating than observing the breath? Don't try to sell it. There's no great ad copy for just that. I mean, there's a lot of benefits that people can tout and a lot of physiological rewards that people can describe. But hopefully, if you practice over time, you can have brief tastes of noticing that this thing which on the outside seems not particularly interesting starts to become fascinating. Fascinating. It's a great word. There's freshness in every breath. I keep loving to bring forward the image of, we all kind of live in a, I think, assumed sense that our past is somewhere, maybe to our right. I don't know how you figure your past is. And our future is somewhere to our left, maybe. But a really weird reality is there is no past and there is no future. All we have is the present. The past, where is it? I mean, we have memories of it. You can't point to the World Trade Centers today because they're past. They're completely non-existent. Non-existent. For all I know, my house might have been hit by lightning by the time I came here. Future, the same can occur. We assume a kind of solidity to the past, assume a kind of solidity to the future. They're not there. Those are mind-constructed images. We are living on a razor's edge of the present. It's all we have. It's kind of mind-blowing when you start contemplating it. Kind of mind-blowing. And there are no repetitions. This breath now is not the last breath, and it's not the future breath. And the physical sensations associated with the breath are varying. Now, it's true that when we're cultivating concentration, we're trying to find one point and see what it's like and settle there. But that point's going to vary. But our ability to rest in a process of breathing right along with the wave of the out-breath and the in-breath, that's all present. And it's all different. It's all changing. And there's a quality of mind that can arise when we're practicing this discipline. There are all sorts of what are called positive mental qualities associated with meditation on the breath. If it's going well, the mind might feel lighter. It might feel more flexible. It might feel more effective. You may have a kind of clarity that all of a sudden you notice that you can start feeling these little physical ripples, whether it's in your belly that you're watching the breath, or at your nose, or in your throat, or your lungs, little physical sensations that you wouldn't even be able to describe with language because you don't know what words you could use for these little blips of changing experience. But you rest in those experiences and you let yourself be absorbed in those experiences. That's a very different stance from breath, been there, done that, I know that's the breath, or I know that's the point of contact with my nose, and just kind of very surfacely relating to that connection, as opposed to, actually, what am I experiencing? What is the nature of the experience? And I'm going to settle into this experience and let myself become absorbed in it, not like standing at a distance looking at my breath, but actually seeing how close I can get in to allowing my knowing and my experience just be a very, very simple, unified experience. Maybe non-verbalizable, but it might be very fresh, very, very fresh. So one of the qualities of renewal that meditation offers us is this capacity to train in experiencing freshness. And you can then bring that quality to other areas of your life. You know, I work with people, and so to the extent that my perception gets refined in meditation, I do a lot of Zoom therapy nowadays. So I'm talking with someone and I see they say something, but their cheek quivers in a certain way. Before I might not have noticed that. You know, I've also been encouraged in training to notice this kind of minute change in a person's presentation. So I might say, you know, what just happened? Person may be aware, they may not be aware. You know, did you have some sort of reaction going on? You're a cook, you become more sensitive to your ingredients, the way you shape your ingredients, the amount of time you cook your ingredients, the taste that results in the ingredients. You're a human being and you're sensitive to the tone of voice of beings that you're in relationship with. If you're a parent, you may discern very, very subtle distinctions in the way a child cries or burps. And we're all astounded when we see moms say, oh, they're just hungry, I know that cry. Oh no, my baby's distressed right now, that's the cry of distress. How did you figure that out? Well, I know my baby. Really slight variations. How rich life can become if we allow ourselves the time and the space to become more discerning. You know, I was years ago, I think there was a special on, you know, the atomic disaster in Japan, Fukushima. But I think it was during the course of the documentary. It was April cherry blossom time. And I think they mentioned that in Japanese there are 8 different words for the distinct stages of the cherry blossom. Amazing. 8 words for cherry blossoms, and we know for Eskimos there are so many words for different kinds of snow. You know, in one way you might think, oh, it's just a lot of details. But again, if we go back to Genlin and recognize that experience is in the body, people in a culture, whether it be Eskimos with snow or the Japanese with the cherry blossoms, they're actually willing to slow down enough to sense in their body the different stages of these cherry blossoms and appreciate those. And each stage is fresh in its own way. Even when the cherry blossom is fading, that's a particular freshness, it's a particular newness. And if we allow that kind of attitude to permeate our lives, how different things become, where curiosity is kind of the reigning umbrella, to mix up language in an interesting way. If curiosity is our reigning umbrella, everything becomes interesting. Everything becomes fresh. In therapy, when I was studying, and I studied every branch of therapy that was coming up, especially in the first kind of 20 years of my career, but I'm still a bit of a fiend. But one type of therapy was called solution-oriented therapy. So what's the solution-oriented therapy? The ordinary mind wants to come in and tell the therapist everything that's gone wrong. And I'm like that when I'm in therapy. Let me tell you all the bad news. But it's very, very interesting. If we do couples therapy, solution-oriented couples therapy, the couple wants to come in and despise one another and tell me, just how bad their partner is. And for a solution-oriented therapist, the interesting question is, how did you stop arguing? People don't even remember. I don't know, we stopped. But guess what? That's the miracle. What did you do to stop arguing? And it's worth a lot of exploration. But we got tired. Oh, how do you know you got tired? My body was feeling weighty. So your body was feeling weighty, and what did you do to stop? I just stopped calling her names. There are actually things that people do to stop arguments. But that's not what people pay attention to. That's the exception. That's the freshness. It's so important to be able to see the exceptions and value them. Certainly in science, Houston is a kind of science town. If you really look at the theory of science, the deepest progress in science is when somebody actually starts acknowledging fresh exceptions. We couldn't make any sense of the following occurrence, but we saw it so many times that we finally started paying attention to it. And then this whole amazing theory develops for something that just seemed like noise. But it's the valuation of the particulars. We don't want to give up our ordinary mind. It's very, very valuable. And in learning to meditate, we learn to cultivate an appreciation for the exceptions, the unique, the fresh. So it turns out we're going to do a reading during the course of the meditation, and I had planned my talk, but it turns out to be pretty in tune with the reading that we'll do. We'll take a 1-minute break so that we can shift gears to begin our meditation at 11 a.m. Central Time. And so if people need to stretch or just take a breath, we'll regroup in about half a minute.